Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale. Non è un'idea, innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire. Non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
Quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Come il piano Easy Smart a canone zero, anziché a 3,90 € al mese. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca. Quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Nasce Easy Bank, la nuova banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca.
Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale. Non è un'idea, innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire. Non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna, anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
Quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Come il piano Easy Smart a canone zero, anziché a 3,90 € al mese. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca. Quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Nasce Easy Bank, la nuova banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca.
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Un cordiale benvenuto a ognuno di
Welcome everyone
and especially welcome to the Vice President of the Italian Council of Ministers and Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, Antonio Tajani. I'd like to thank the Executive Director of the World Food Programme, Cynthia McCain, who couldn't be with us today, but she will be present with a video. And I welcome the General Secretary of AVSI, Giampaolo Silvestri, who's going to be the moderator in this meeting. The Rimini meeting is a meeting for the friendship among people. So it is for us a great honor to tackle with our distinguished guests a critical issue. That is to say, cooperation with Africa, a continent with a great potential and a lot of young people who need to be welcomed. The Italian government has to face these challenges as common challenges. So we need to renounce any idea of supremacy and work for the common good and a mutual benefit. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Minister Tajani and the whole ministry, and Minister Stefano Gaddi in particular, for their pressure cooperation in the creation of the International Pavilion that in this edition of the meeting is entitled The Pathways of Friendship. And it focuses on projects and pathways that grant support in emergency cases in countries that are in need and grant safety and protection to those who flee from war and conflict. The ministry this year, like in the past, coordinated the presence of important national and international partners like the CAAM of Bari, who is a key partner of the Italian cooperation in many initiatives in terms of food security and rural development of the Mediterranean basin, one of the most prestigious initiatives carried out by Italy. Thank you.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We start this dialogue with Minister Tajani, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Development Cooperation. The title is Our Common Challenges with Africa. Africa is one of the priorities of the Italian foreign policy, and this won't change in the future. Italy, the government, the civil society have given a lot of attention to this continent in the later years. So the minister who's responsible actually for the Italian foreign policy will explain the Italian approach in its African policy and what Italy will and can do at the moment. But before doing that, we would like to listen to this and watch this video of Silvestri McCain, who is the Executive Director of the World Food Programme, one of the most important agencies of the UN, of the so-called Roman Pole, because it is based actually in Rome, as FAO, for instance, and INFAD, and it has the task to provide food to peoples in need, especially in Africa and in emergency cases. So we asked Silvestri McCain how she sees the African situation at the moment, the basis of her experience and her role. So she sent us this short video, and we're going to watch it together.
Today,
In recent months, I visited several African countries, including Somalia, the Sahel nations of West Africa, and most recently, South Sudan. I've seen firsthand the immense challenges, but also the opportunities which exist all across the continent. Today, 1 in 5 Africans face chronic hunger. Conflict, climate change, and economic and political instability are fueling this humanitarian crisis. In Somalia, I met Halima, who told me she had fled 200 kilometers from home to escape the armed groups attacking her community. And more African farmers are watching helplessly as their crops and livestock are destroyed by climate change, leaving their families hungry. But it doesn't have to be this way. I've also seen the tremendous potential that exists all across Africa. The plentiful natural resources, the wealth of wisdom and knowledge that exists in every community, and the inspiring talents and energy of all the young people I've met. We need to work together and with our African partners to harness this potential and lay the foundations for the continent's long-term success. Humanitarian assistance is not enough on its own. We also need to tackle the root causes of poverty and hunger so people can live and thrive in their own communities. This means investing in school meals programs so vulnerable children receive the precious gift of an education. Helping farmers build resilience to climate change so they can protect their livelihoods and ward off hunger. And scaling up social protection programs so hungry communities can get help without having to leave home. None of us can do this alone. We need a genuine partnership across all sectors, governments, civil society, NGOs, and critically, the private sector. The Italian government showed true global leadership at last month's Food Systems Summit stock-taking moment held in Rome. Its presidency of the G7 in 2024 is a real opportunity to shine a spotlight on the vital contribution that sustainable development can make to reducing hunger and poverty in Africa and around the world. WFP is ready to support our friends and partners in Italy and across Africa. Together, we can unlock investment, share our expertise, and build a brighter, more sustainable future for Africa and the world. Thank you.
Ecco, come appunto accennava.
So as Director McCain said, Africa is a continent with a lot of shadows, so to say, but also with a great potential, and the World Food Programme Agency is working on this potential. But now, back to you, Minister Tajani, and we would like to start with your personal experience. He covered very important roles. He was a commissioner, he was the president of the European Parliament. Today he is Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation in Italy. And, well, this experience, I think, gave you the opportunity to have a privileged vantage point of the relationship between Europe and Africa and how this relationship changed over time. We in AVSI always say that we cannot longer say we here in Europe and they there in Africa. Our destinies are intertwined. We either win together or nobody wins. So do you share this kind of thought? Did you have any proof of it in your travels, in your meetings, and how did the relationship to Africa change over time? First of all, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here today to talk about a theme that has always been crucial for me, not only from my political point of view, but also in the past, because the relationship between Italy and Africa, Europe and Africa, is something I became familiar with when I was a kid. The nuns who were my teachers always talked to me about what we could do for Africa. Then we need to take into account how this relationship with Africa had an impact on our history. You cannot say Rome if you don't say Carthago, the ancient Egypt, what it meant for us, the Library of Alexandria. That part of Africa is so important, so influential in our culture. And then there are so many different forms of relationship, the missionary work, for instance, as well as the connections among Christians. There is an ancient culture in Ethiopia, for instance. That is a country that has its own heritage, cultural heritage, with, well, deeply rooted in the past. One of the tribes of Israel apparently lived there. So there are so many connections with the Mediterranean world. When I became a European commissioner, first for transport and then for industry, I always tried to understand how Europe could improve its relationship to Africa. One of the last things I did as a commissioner was the organization of a big event organized together with the African Commission on the trans-African and trans-European networks that could connect in order to use infrastructures and transport to encourage the development of both economies. So I said we organized this event together with our African partners. And this is important because if we want to build a relationship of friendship, we need to respect these millions and millions of people who are our neighbors. If we look at Africa with a neo-colonial way of thinking, our African partners are not going to welcome our support, our friendship, and this would be detrimental for us and for Africa because there will be other countries like Russia and China who would intervene, and they do not have any interest in a good neighbor relationship. They just have an economic and hegemonic interest. As President of the European Parliament, I did my best to improve the relationship with Africa. I organized a big event and invited hundreds of African leaders to talk about the relationship between our two continents. And Africa has grown in terms of quality of training. Africa is both a very poor and a very rich continent. So what we have to do is to develop the very rich part, which actually is a great opportunity. So this is the role we have to play. So, as I said before, in playing our role, we needed to respect the identity of our African partners. So when I was a commissioner, people said we have to look at Africa with African glasses and not with European glasses. But this should make us understand better their mentality. For instance, Tunisia, we managed to overcome many so to say, many doubts expressed by other countries in order to give financial support to this country to avoid the country to fall into the hands of extremists and to become a corridor of illegal migration. The most difficult issue that we had to overcome and that the Italian government had to overcome was to make the other European countries understand that our task is to grant the stability of that country rather than transforming Tunisia, turning Tunisia into Denmark or Norway or Sweden, because that would be impossible. Sometimes, and we saw that also in the past, people from the West arrived in other countries and said, that's what you have to do. We give you the rules, you have to abide by them. Italians, as well as the Italian military, are always loved in other countries because they are more flexible and they can understand the identity of other countries. So if we want to create a good relationship, and our African friends ask for this, so if we want to build a strong relationship with Africa, with a shared strategy in the long term, we need to act aiming at friendship. We cannot say, you have to do what I tell you when we go to our African friends. So, as we know, Africa is rich in raw materials. So, for instance, lithium, and Italy is an industrial country, the second manufacturing country in Europe. Europe is an industrial continent. We know that there are problems in these times of crisis for the industry, and raw materials, especially those that are not easy to find, are extremely expensive. So it is China that decides the prices of these raw materials, and this creates problems for our enterprises in terms of their competitiveness at global level. So what do we have to do in order to have raw materials at good prices? We need to reach agreements with the Africans that are beneficial for both continents. So mixed companies that actually can extract raw materials that are then processed in Italy, but then in Africa, with the African labor force. This would encourage the development and the growth and leads to the industrialization of the continent. And thanks to these agreements, we would be able to buy raw materials at better prices. So we cannot just say that we want to just have the raw materials that they have at the prices we like best. For instance, if we refer to the recent events in Niger, well, I've always tried to make make dialogue prevail, because well, we did express our support to the president of Niger. We'd always asked for this country to go back to democracy, but we never thought that there was the need for a Western military intervention in that country to impose a government that was better for us. This would have caused a negative reaction in the whole African continent, and we would have seen as colonialists who just wanted to grab everything that was at their disposal, because that's what we needed. So that's not the way to build a relationship with African, both politically and from the human point of view. So these are some of the things on which the Italian government is working, and then I will tell you about what we are doing. There was a big event on Africa with the involvement of countries that invest in Africa, like the Gulf countries, with heads of state and government. In November, there will be an African-Italian event, also at the level of head of state and government. And I summoned twice the African ambassadors because I want to know what they want from us, what do they expect us to do. So they asked me to talk with some of our ministers, the ministers of the sectors that are more interesting for them. We already had 2 meetings, and we are creating this summit that should be a summit based on friendship and concrete cooperation. Thank you. Well, I would like now to really go deeper into this question. I think this is something that is interesting for everyone. So I would like to talk about this famous Mattei plan. I remember that a few years ago, you often talked about a Marshall Plan for Africa, starting from 2015. So first, I would like to understand whether this Mattei plan, in a way, is an evolution of this Marshall Plan, or after the conference of July the 23rd, this Rome process that was actually started by the President of the Council. Well, we would like to know more about this because it is really interesting for us. So I'm asking you to tell us what is the content of this Mattei plan and also the structure, the methodology that is going to be used. Well, when we talk, when I used to talk about the Marshall Plan, I was talking first as a European Commissioner and then as the President of the European Parliament. So I was talking about a European strategy. The Mattei Plan is, in a way, the Italian section of the European Marshall Plan. So I would really like for the other European countries to do what Italy is trying to do at the moment in order to favor the growth of the African continent. This is a very structured strategy. There are development aid that my ministry is providing, about 2 billion, and there are hundreds of projects in all the countries of Africa. And maybe we could, in a way, readjust our investments. But anyway, there is also the chance, the opportunity to use our skills, our knowledge as a manufacturing country with 4 million small enterprises and a high-level agricultural and industry. So we should use this know-how, these skills, and bring it to the African country through agreements, as I was saying before, that could be beneficial for us and for them. And I just give you an example that comes from the agricultural sector. With Minister Bernini, I went to Egypt as head of a delegation of agricultural enterprises that were enterprises that actually also had agricultural machineries, because the Italian experience in the cultivation of difficult soils can be very useful. Then there is also another aspect, which is that of research, because as you know, climate change is actually destroying part of agriculture, in particular in sub-Saharan Africa. So this research focuses on more resilient plants. In Parliament, and MP Nere is here, and he is the father of this project. We had an investment for technologies of assisted agriculture. This produces plants that are more resistant to climate change as well as to other agents. So they react better to a desert-like situation. And these are plants that do not call for the use of plant pharmaceuticals. They don't need any chemicals that could actually cause damage to the soil, to the territory. So the Italian enterprises were given by African governments some parts of lands near the Nile that should be then turned into a soil that could start really producing for the self-sufficiency of the sector of cereals. So this is something that is also connected with what is happening in Ukraine with the cereal corridor through the Black Sea. And Eni as well is working on this. There are a lot of agreements reached with the African partners which are not based on an exploitation of the energy resources. We, and I mean we Italians, provide our technology. Obviously, we have a benefit from this, but this benefit is shared with the country where oil and gas are extracted. So this is an action that goes beyond I pay for what you give me, and it is also the opportunity to use the results of our technologies in these countries. For instance, the European Union supports an energy connection between Sicily and Tunisia. So there are so many different projects. There are many meetings with countries like Angola and also in the Horn of Africa, where there is a traditional presence of Italians. So I think about Ethiopia, for instance, Eritrea. Then obviously there is the war that caused so many deaths. So we are working to reinforce the Italian presence that aims at cooperation. We don't want to donate money. Obviously, we need to help where it is needed, but we also want to build a concrete friendship. And I can add that we are now working also in the field of training and culture, education. We have created, and this is just the beginning of our project, a series of training programs in our universities for young Africans in order to give them or to transfer to them our know-how. When these young people will go back to their countries, there will be managers, there will be politicians, there will be military chiefs. They will always look at Italy as a friendly country. They will be able to speak and understand Italian. So this is another aspect on which we are working at the moment, because we want to create this very strong friendship, knowing that Italians are very well seen in the African continent, so we don't have to lose that. And we will be able to safeguard our interests, of course, but we will be able to help the rich part of the country emerge.
Certainly, in terms of contents, when it comes to farming supply chains, energy, well, these seem to be the most important areas and domains of the Mattei Plan. And then training and education. Well, we think that really education and training are key, because when you train and educate people, and especially young people, then these people can make the difference in their country. Yes, it's about investing in human capital. What can you tell us about this? You already mentioned these training activities with SMEs, but, well, will Italy do more in that respect? Oh, yes, certainly. Also, we are thinking about inviting Italian schools within the Mattei plan, and also there was another idea within the migration flow decree, because there was an additional chapter with respect to the people who would come to Italy and that would be already been trained through our consulates so that they could come over to find a job, and that would be additional with respect to the agreed upon migration flows. Certainly, education and training are essential. We need to invest more in the African continent, and we also need to open up more embassies, and the Council of Ministers is setting up an embassy in Mauritania, which is a very important country also for the stability of the sub-Saharan Africa. And on top of that, we must acknowledge the positive presence of our diplomats, what has been done in Sudan, for instance, because our citizens, both in Sudan and in Niger, have never ever been touched, even during the most difficult moments. So this means that we have been doing pretty well. And then when it comes to training and education, it is of the utmost importance to economically and politically support the presence of Christian missions. When it comes to the world of missions and missionaries, we must acknowledge that their role is very important in concrete and tangible terms, not only for transcendent terms, because they favor the training and education of many, many young people. We should be even more grateful to many of these missionaries. Father Albanese helped us a lot to fix the problem at the Bangui Hospital. Later today, I will meet some nuns, some Salesian nuns, and to fix some issues. I see the General Director Castaldo, who is nodding, because Italian nuns, Salesian Italian nuns, are doing a great deal of work in Eritrea. So all of these presences are key in terms of culture, in terms of training. Well, I don't deal with transcendent questions. It's not my job, but as a Minister of Foreign Affairs, I can support the work of missionaries, because they do really something very important, and they do that unconditionally. I mean, there are no hidden interests in what they do. Yes, I just want to say something more. Well, sometimes I hear, not very nice things about priests and nuns. Instead, they do so much for the weakest, and we should really pay homage to what they do and be grateful and celebrate their work, because that is really crucial. And again, back to the love and passion for Africa. Well, when you start primary school and you learn that when you get born, we are all equal, regardless of the color of our skin. I mean, you can't become a racist if this is what you're told at school when you start going to school. I've never been a racist because the nuns taught me not to be one. Well, my parents wanted for me a Christian education, because again, when we see this culture that is made of hatred vis-a-vis other people. And well, I'm not talking about illegal immigration. Well, criminals are criminals, and that's it, regardless of the color, their skin, or their country of origin. We always need to know when it comes to immigrants that, well, these are, first of all, people. They're human beings like us. We were born here just for accident. It was accidental. I mean, this is absolutely important never to forget this. It is important to have a positive attitude, as our missions in Africa have, because this favors the Italian presence there, and again, the positive image of the missionary priest or nun that maybe teach there and teach Italian maybe, well, they become ambassadors of our country, so that our country can certainly support these very special, unofficial ambassadors, because they are formal ambassadors of our country. And I would also really like to emphasize their importance and their role. It is in our national interest to support all of their initiatives. Well, it's not because I'm a Christian that I want to support them. Well, I want to do that in my capacity as a minister. And the fact that personally I'm a Christian, it's a sort of additional thing. Well, those missionaries are part of the Italian system. They help Italy. They help Italy in its dialogue with Africa. And this is something that should never, ever be underestimated. And I think that very soon we will organize an event inviting these ambassadors carrying a cross. Well, when it comes to the faith-based organizations and the church and the missions, well, certainly they play they play a key role. So faith-based organizations certainly play a key role in Africa. But well, I have another question now that has to do with religious freedom. And certainly this is a topic that is extremely dear to the meeting, so that everybody is free to express their beliefs and faith, so with no sort of preferences. And in June, you designated a special officer for that, and the ministry allocated also special resources for Christian minorities. And so this is a topic that you consider as extremely important, also in relation to what you just said before, because, I mean, the Catholic Church in particular plays a key role in Africa. Well, how does the government and your ministry want to proceed in that respect? Well, I want to quote a sentence, even if they may sound controversial. And when it comes to religious minorities, I want to quote the Egyptian President al-Sisi. And during the last meeting I had with him, I asked him about Regeni and Zaki. And then I talked about the Copt minority. And until that point, al-Sisi had been very, very kind. And then when I asked him about the Coptic minority, he reacted not in a nice way. He said, it's not a Coptic minority. They are Egyptians like all the others, but of a Christian faith. So they are like all the others. And so this should be understood in all countries in the world. And we saw the devastation of many churches in Pakistan because apparently 2 Christians had torn down a page from the Quran. Was it blasphemous? Well, even if that was true, well, you would never ever destroy or devastate a church or a place for somebody believing in another faith. Too many times men have used religious faith and religion in general as an excuse to start wars. I think that every human being has the right to freely believe in the creeds and faith they want. So Buddhists and Muslims, Jewish, I mean, in Italy there is full religious freedom, even though we are a country with a Christian majority. So there should never ever be hatred because of religious motivations. I've been the first minister, for instance, to visit in the United Arab Emirates, a beautiful creation realized by the local authorities. There was a beautiful religious center. The same architect built a mosque, a church, and a synagogue, and they're all next to each other. It's fantastic. So you can visit these three religious buildings, and there is religious freedom. The majority is Muslim, but there are hundreds of thousands of immigrants that are of Christian faith, and so this decision was made to have this kind of approach. And the principle of reciprocity should be applied everywhere. For many years, Christians and Muslims in Albania have even married each other. So, I mean, really, faith should lead to peace. Let's never forget what Pope Giampaolo II did, the Assisi summit was key in that respect. He never gave up his persuasion, his Catholic and Christian persuasion, and he thought that all the people believing in God are looking up at the sky, and so religions should always lead to peace. That is why it is absolutely paramount to protect and promote the religious freedom. It is a right, and this right should be protected and promoted not through violence but through dialogue. So interreligious dialogue is fundamental. Article 17 of the Treaty of the European Union, I was in charge of that when I was the President of the European Parliament, and I've seen imams being persecuted by Muslims because they had paid homage to the victims of the Brussels synagogue, but they were just human beings. For those imams, according to some fundamentalists, those imams were considered as betrayers of the faith. So we need really to talk a lot, to work a lot, to make this full reciprocity principle a reality. But also, on top of that, in the countries where Christians are a majority, they should never ever be afraid of declaring themselves as Christians. Otherwise, the non-Christian minority won't respect you. If you take away crosses from schools, taking crosses from public offices, is not a way to respect a minority. It's a weakness. It's giving up one's own identity. And when you give up your own identity, well, then you trigger intolerance and aggressiveness, because giving up one's own identity, it's a sign of weakness and not of strength. I remember a TV report once telling about the director of a school that decided not to have the nativity scene embodied by children, and so there were interviews of the non-Christian parents at the exit of the school, and they said, no, well, for us, God, Jesus is a prophet, but we never asked for that. So what does this mean? This means that if you freely give up your own identity and you're afraid, to show your beliefs, then maybe you will come across somebody who will stop respecting you, and maybe the other will try to impose their model upon you. So if you really want to have a dialogue and to open up more on migratory issues, we need to be certain about our identity. In Italy, our identity can be a Christian identity, and this does not mean to exclude the others, but our identity can be nothing but Christian. Then we have, of course, the separation between the state and the church, and this means freedom. This means, being open-minded, but really need to commit. I don't understand why, if we have a minority that is offended, everybody, gets agitated. If a Christian minority is offended, well, nothing happens. But this is not okay, because we always need to protect people and the persons. May I say something about Africa? Well, just want to add a remark, because what you said about Al-Sisi at the beginning is very interesting. The fact that you said that the Coptic citizens are Egyptian citizens, they're not a minority. This is the very same concept that Pope Francis expresses in the Brother All encyclical letter, when he says that we need to somehow emphasize and rediscover the principle of citizenship. People should feel like citizens, because the notion of citizenship is what somehow enhances human beings. So that's the sort of laying foundation of any friendship. Again, the opportunity to collaborate with people of a different religious creed could and should be built on that. Why not? What do you think about that? Well, the Jewish community that has been very strong in the past, for instance, was very important during the Risorgimento, and also many soldiers died during the First World War, and the racial laws were surprising for many citizens, for many Jewish citizens, just because of that, because they were just Italians. They were not Jewish Italians, they were just Italians. They were part of Italian culture, Italian history, Italian identity. And again, they had been citizens, very good citizens, because they had even fought for Italy. Those who had fallen had fought for their home country, so for Italy. So from this point of view, I totally agree on what you said. But now I want to share an anecdote about Africa that this has nothing to do with what we are saying now. Well, because together with my cabinet and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we did something. At a distance of 250 kilometers from here, there is the house of John the 23rd. Sorry, and yes, there is a house of Don Oreste Benzi, of Father Oreste Benzi. I had the chance to visit it with my wife, and I saw many, many African women there who had been saved by Donato Bonaiuto, the heir of Father Benzi, and they told us terrible stories of slavery, of really a lot of pain, and it never happened in my life. I remember a woman from Niger, and she really fell on her knees in front of me, And it was, I mean, a gesture of desperation, of despair, total despair, and even submission. And she was mixing Italian and English, and she told me that she hadn't seen her little girl in Niger, and on top of that, in Niger there was also the Boko Haram danger, and the little girl was with the grandma, and it seemed impossible. But 1 month ago, we were able to make this little girl come to Italy. Now she joined her mother that was saved from prostitution, and so we were asked to be the godfathers. She asked my wife and I to be godfathers of this little girl, and I think that this is the way we should look at Africa. So politics, well, has nothing to do, but in this case, political institutions have helped this woman that has been wounded so deeply. Well, we helped her at least make one of these wounds scar, and we hope that also that little girl from Nigeria will have a better life. A very last short question. As AVSI,
La nostra vision
Our vision, so to speak, and you know this very well, because the first public event Minister Tajani attended as a minister was when we organized last October our meeting, conference, The Future We Want. So you know, Minister, that we wanted to work in a world where everyone is at the center of their own development and the development of their communities. So what is your vision? What guides you in as a minister, particularly with reference to the relationship with Africa? What words would you choose as a minister? Well, these are the same words that guide me in my private life. The centrality of the person, solidarity towards the others, because we were born to live together with our fellow human beings, and those who have more have the duty to help those who apparently have less, or at least to help them rediscover their resources. Always with the spirit of fraternity and not in a condescending way, because that would be spiteful. So these are the words or the ideas that should guide the life of a politician. Well, this is what I'm trying to do. I can make mistakes, obviously, but these are the things I was taught as a child. This is what my parents taught me, what my teachers taught me, and this Christian education. I'm not a good Christian. No one is a good Christian, but this kind of education gave me a vision. I always know the path I have to follow, even when it is difficult, because I can follow a polar star.
Ed è una stella polare.
This star makes you feel safe. Feeling safe is not easy, but that polar star, since I was a child and now I have white hair, this star has always been there for me, has always made me feel safe, has always made me feel I was doing the right thing in spite of my mistakes. I know if I can talk about grace, I wouldn't be able to express this in so many words, but what I was taught was fundamental for my life. This is what I'm trying to teach my children. You cannot be happy, but you can be at peace, even when you play high responsibility roles like the ones I play. Without that polar star, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing.
Grazie Ministro, ringraziamo il Ministro non solo perché in
We would like to thank Minister Tajani because he helped us in this moment where dialogue is so important. He helped us understand better what Italy wants to do, what the Italian government wants to do in terms of its relationship with Africa. So we now know more about this. We have a clearer picture. But thank you, Minister, also for sharing with us your personal experiences, which we found extremely interesting and which make us understand better why he's so deeply committed to this friendship with Africa. So we would like to thank you for what you shared with us. I'd like to thank you all for being with us.
In genere quando dici che sei cristiano.
Well, usually when you say you're a Christian, no one, well, you don't receive an applause. But here at the meeting, the situation is completely different. I'd just like to remind you that you can donate in the Dona Ora stands in order to help the Rimini meeting and make these meetings possible. Thank you again.
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Poi andiamo a mangiare. Questo è il piano. Io sono il suo accompagnatore e la riporto anche.
Il senso religioso o l'esperienza religiosa è innanzitutto un fatto, un fenomeno obiettivo, un fatto reale. Non è un'idea, innanzitutto non è un modo di sentire. Non solo si tratta di un fatto, di un avvenimento, ma del fatto più imponente e più inestirpabile della storia dell'uomo. Più imponente, più vasto, che neanche il fenomeno dell'amore dell'uomo e della donna, che neanche il fenomeno del rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perché il senso religioso è un avvenimento che pone, che afferma o che ricerca l'orizzonte entro il quale acquisti senso anche il rapporto tra l'uomo e la donna. anche il rapporto tra genitori e figli. Perciò è più vasto, perfino di quelli.
Quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Come il piano Easy Smart a canone zero, anziché a 3,90 € al mese. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca. Quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Nasce Easy Bank, la nuova banca digitale di Intesa Sanpaolo. Easy Bank, semplicemente banca.